Finally, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to present today's presenter, Todd Snelgrove. For those of you who aren't familiar with Todd, he's a Leverage Point favorite. He's a global subject matter expert in value buying and selling. For 2 decades, he's helped B2B companies drive the value strategy from ideation to financial realization by making sure that the value that they create is calculated, communicated, and priced for. So with that, Todd, welcome, and you'll be free to take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, and thanks everybody for joining. So when Nick and me were chatting about doing a session, it was like, this is one area that I see a lot of opportunity, and the opportunity is based on watching mistakes, or people do things when they're creating new products or services, and they use the term value, but then they launch it, and everybody goes, ugh, it's not that successful. So that's the idea of today's session, is to try to see how do we input the value mindset into any new product or service that we're creating to go to market. So I spent 20 plus years as a global VP of value. And basically the reason for that job was, creating great products or services is one thing, but if you can't communicate it in a way that customers understand it and are willing to pay for it, it's kind of worthless. So value quantification is at the core of that. That allows you to do value pricing, value differentiation, and value communication. So we should be up and running. And there we go. Sorry, a little lag there. Real quickly, just to give you a flavor of some of the companies that I've worked with in the last 5 or so years. Some pretty big companies, and a lot of industrial, but I was just saying to Nick, there's some high tech in there. There's some pharma, there's some software, there's some industrial. I think there's some people on the call that might be from some of these companies. Reach out to me. You're so big. It might have been a group I worked with. Anything from keynotes at executive management meetings to long-term programs to really work on value differentiation. Funny enough, the similarities between value selling, value buying, value quantification are amazing across all these different industries, whether it's product or service in the B2B markets. For a reminder for any of us that saw this in high school or university, the stage gate process is one of the major processes that companies use when they're creating a new product or service. So quick reminder, then we're going to get into how should value and value quantification be used during these different stages. So a funnel gets created, ideation, a bunch of people funneling a bunch of ideas. They can be off the wall, they can be moonshots, they can be whatever. They go into the gate 1, and you do a preliminary, just quick overview. What does this make sense? I mean, very high level. Are there competitors? Where's the market? Stage 2, build the business case. And all I can do is speak on how I've seen this implemented, not maybe what the theory behind it was. So to be clear there, but every time I see build the business case, it's, how much could we sell? What's the price point we could sell? If we sold, what's the existing market? If we take X share of that market, it'd be worth this. It's a bunch of what ifs sometimes. But if we sold it at this price, if we produced it here, here's how much we could make. The business case not being what would the value for the customer be. So probably the first stage where you say, well, how do we know how much we're going to sell or what we can price it at if we don't know what the incremental value to the customer base is? Then the smart people build it, they develop it, it goes to production, they validate it. And I'll tell you here, this is a great opportunity for some value measurement that, at least in my experience, a lot of companies forget to do. And then you go to launch. And, I think close with some ideas, a good product launch should include all these business ideas and value quantification. So, my thought process is, okay, how do you take value, a value tool, a value mindset, a value person, and engage them in this process? So let me just tell a real quick story. So I worked for a huge global company, $10 billion in sales, and they invested a lot of money in research and development. Very mature market, and the CEO's point was, if we don't innovate, we die. We've got to innovate and differentiate. So they spent a lot of money on research and development. A lot of new products and services came out, patented, differentiated. Success rate wasn't very good. And usually after it had been launched, I would get the call like, hey, can you review this and see what is the value for the customer? How can we present it? How do we market it? Like, maybe a little late. So we eventually got to the point where they said, you want to know what? We need a value voice in this process on 2 components. One is, working with the teams to build the value. What does this look like for customers? What is the value? How do I quantify what that value is? How should I price it? And then also from the role-playing customer side, challenging the development team, saying, is that really a value? So I kind of worked on it from both sides of the process. So during the investigation, again, 28 years ago, Leverage Point didn't have a tool that I was aware of, at least. But I would say to the team, there's 400 variables we can quantify: less energy, less downtime, increased customer satisfaction. Why don't we mine those? If you're creating a product or service, why don't we go in and pull those value drivers out? We know what the formula is. We might even be able to do some research to see, what is it worth to customers by different segments. There are cases in here, what we call verified, and I'll explain that later, but where the customer said afterwards, yes, you presented me a business case, you thought it would be worth X, I actually implemented it and I got Y. So now we start to get some data points of, if we could reduce energy, if we could reduce this, if we could increase that, we know what it's worth. So when the development people say, we think we can increase this by X%, I now am getting some ideas by segments, by country, by any segmentation. What is that worth? Build a business case, looking at the real market opportunity and the real competition. So a lot of times at this stage, I see, well, X% of our customers bought this, it would be worth this. And my favorite from a technical background was my team colleagues, maybe a better way to say it, would say, well, there is no competitor. We're creating something, so there's always competition. Doing nothing might not be the smart choice, but it's a choice. Okay, so there always is a next best alternative. It might not be the smartest decision, but it exists. So too often we go to market and say, well, there's no competition, and then 6 months later when the phone call, you say, there's the do in-house, there's the do on their own, there's the hire an outside company to do it, there's a variation of another product or service that does almost the same. So sometimes people just try to fly through this process because they want to get to launch. Spend the time and money to get it right. Do less, but do it better, versus having a KPI of how many new products or service can we launch this year. I've seen that KPI before, and it's amazing. If you give the KPI, people hit the number of product launches, the success rate went down dramatically. One of the questions, and I can't remember the terminology, there's different pricing tools you can use, Van Westorf, et cetera, but some companies would say, would you pay for this? That's not the same as what would you pay for this? Whether it's a new product, service, or differentiation, would you pay? Or, first question was, would you like it? If it's better and I want it, I'll take it for sure. I didn't say I'm going to pay for it. And then, would you pay? Yeah, I pay more. That's not the same as this is going to be 30% more than the alternative. So different questions, but this is the time to start asking, what is the customer's willingness to pay? And again, their willingness to pay is directly affected based on your ability to demonstrate value. During the development phase, engineers can almost create any solution they want. They'll create any benefit. They just have to throw enough money at it. But usually you're making a trade-off. So an example from my old life is, we could make this thing more energy efficient. Engineers do their smart stuff. It'll be lighter, it'll be this, whatever that is. But the trade-off might be it doesn't last as long. Well, I could just run 2 economic simulations and say, well, wait a minute, which one creates more customer value? Or do I create 2 variations of this? But assuming that, adding functionality just because you can is not the same as adding functionality and benefit that's worth something to the customer. So, again, making a trade-off. I could make a machine last forever and I'd have to build it in titanium or diamonds or something, but someone's going to say, that's not worth the price it's going to cost me to buy it. In the testing and validation phase, again, please use this chance to measure the actual impact, the before and after. Here's how the machine, here's how the customer's process was if I'm doing services. Here's what the average looked like. Then when I do this, what is the average, or what does it look like afterwards? And do that with every different customer sampling you're doing. At least for us, they said, yeah, it went well. How much better did it act? I don't know. But we never got the before reading or measurement. I'm like, oh, it's tough to quantify. It's better versus what? Ask questions then. And then when you get to production and launch, I mean, this is a whole day session in and of itself, but every new product or service should have value stuff. I'd like a sample business case for each major segment, okay? Because they're all going to be different. But a lot of customers, that might be good enough to get the interest. Oh, I see the logic. I see how you're going to affect this, this, and this. Hey, my numbers are different, or we don't value that. Okay, now I've engaged something, but I've at least got something to start the discussion with. The reference points for testing, whether that's outside institutions, your own stuff, but having something there to put some meat on these business cases where in some industries, we'll talk about this later, if we can improve this by 1%, I can make if statements all day long. And at some point they work during the sales process, but your whole business can't be based on if. Give me some reasoning you can do this. Of course, frequently asked questions, any competitors? And we'll get into pricing models very quickly at the end. I mean, giving customers choice of how they want to buy, but how they want to pay you for value. Maybe you take some risk, but you take some more reward. So again, hopefully there's some takeaways there. And just to challenge the team, not to slow the process down, but you'll get a much better product launch or service launch if you try to put value within each of these gates. I put this slide in because I think it's very important in two academic terms, but I think they really help reinforce this. One's the term called ATP, ability to pay. And there might be a few slides that some of you have seen before, but these are needed to kind of continue down this discussion point. But some customers might say, we don't have the money. It's a recession, we're broke, whatever it is, we don't have the money. And I remember saying, my colleagues would say, we launched this great product, the reason why, or service, whenever I say product, it could be service. But the customers just don't have money. The reason why we're not selling is the customers don't have the ability, they don't have the money. So talking to the CEO, and he goes in his Scottish accent, I won't say the words he used, but that's not true. We'll leave it at that. And he basically said, I will find the money for anything if you can show me that it gives me more return. You bring me a business case that I believe, number one, based on some hard stuff, with some high probability that will happen, with some meat behind it, not just what if, but it's going to reduce this and increase this, etc. And if it's big enough and I believe it enough, maybe there's a performance component, maybe not. And then I will reprioritize it. I will find the money. And, I just give you a personal example. Maybe I don't have any money today. Someone comes to me with the proposal that says I can reduce this cost at your house. I would do a cost benefit analysis. And if needed, I would find the money. Worst case, you borrow the money. Worst case, you sell something. I don't know. The other concept is willingness to pay. Very simple, but the customer's like, I've got all these priorities. You've come to me with this great new solution you're talking about. That's interesting, Todd, but I've got 5 major programs I'm focusing on this year. And now you just added the 7th or 8th or 9th. Well, the reason why is because they believe their existing programs are more valuable to them, more important to them than what you're proposing. And if you come to them, and I'm making numbers up just to make examples, I think if you do this, Mr. Customer, it will generate $1 million savings per facility per year for X investment. Well, wait a minute, that just shot up the priority. And the reason why I know this is probably people who are on the call where, during the year, you've been given a target, there's been a program in place, that's the focus, and it changes mid-year. That means somebody else came to your company and had a better business case, and that got reprioritized higher. So the point of these two ideas here is that having a demonstrated, documented, quantifiable business case using the customer's metrics that's believable allows you to change the issue of they don't have the money and they don't care. I mean, it's got to be realistic. It can't be just all made up stuff, but it can have a major impact on these areas. Of course, I have to steal a slide. This is great. Tom Nagel, very famous gentleman, we'll read it, but a failure to understand product value, will result in a disconnect between what people build, what we're talking about, what people price, what marketing does to launch that and communicate it, and how the sales team brings that to the customer. It doesn't work. Value needs to be across those 4 things. So value is not just selling, value is just not pricing. Value needs to start with what we build and how we build it. And as we've always talked about before, the value might not be within the product or service itself. It might be the stuff you add around it. But if those 4 functions are not connected, it won't work. Level set slide, because this will set the rest of the discussion up. Nick, I'm going to role play with you just because you can act as the customer here. So, and again, the numbers are made up just to kind of give the mindset. Trust me, the numbers in my old world were much higher. But again, all those logos I showed you before, I can do the same exercise. There's 2 options. There's 2 things, product or service, whether it's a lawyer's fee or a car or a bearing, it doesn't matter. There's a cheap one and there's more expensive one. In this case, one's 50% more expensive. Both these, we'll say products or services, look the same, smell the same, do the same thing, meet the minimum criteria. And from a price perspective, and we might say procurement perspective, why would I ever pay more for something similar that does the same thing? And our team, and I think everybody on here sells value. You wouldn't be spending your time with, investing with Leverage Point, even just to learn, unless you created something of value. But our team would go out, and I'm not going to bore you with the technical discussion, but they would say ours on the right, whatever the green one is, versus the one on the left, ours will use less lubricant versus theirs, use less energy, be less inventory. That might be because of product differentiation. Again, an ISO specification is not the same as a performance specification. These might be the services that are wrapped around the product. That might be that this one exceeds that one. We won't go through it, but one says, I will do more, and here's why and how. And then let's say I put some numbers to this and said, the one on the left, $10 price and a $77 operating cost is 87, and you can do the math on the right. The one on the right is actually $30 cheaper. I'm asking you to spend $5 more, 10 to 15, so $5 more, but it's going to generate $30 of incremental profit. I mean, add zeros if you want to this. And the point I want to make here before I bug Nick a bit is I always want to call that $5 price difference an investment. I hear numerous companies say that's a premium. I can tell you based on my experience only, but procurement people and finance people hate the term premium. And a lot of companies go, we're the premium brand. And I just cringe because the procurement people told me, when I hear the word premium brand, what it tells me is I'm paying more money for something because of a logo. I, as a hard-nosed business person, don't pay more money because of a logo. So, it's an investment. What do you mean by that, Todd? It has a return. Okay. It just sounds better, in my opinion. And again, that's feedback from procurement people around the world. So, we're going to ask, Nick, you're just going to write me a check for 50% more because I'm a nice guy from Canada? Or,
probably not.
Darn you! You're not role playing nicely. You're going to be like an actual customer. You're going to actually challenge me. I mean, and again, just joking, people, of course. But yeah. I mean, all the years, this is a variation of the questions I've heard if I use this slide. Okay. Oops, sorry, got to get back on here. Where did your data come from? It's a similar company example. We've done this somewhere else. It's from our testing, but I've got something around here. I didn't just make it up in the car as I came in. I put some thought into it. And by the way, thank you for the internet. You can Google stuff or whatever search engine, ChatGPT, and find some numbers on all this stuff. What's the average cost of downtime for this type of customer? What's the average life? Whatever. You can get some stuff. Where have you done this before? Let me feel that it's reasonable. Does that example look or sound like me? And wherever your company's head office is, again, it's a North American head office, it's a European, it's an Asian, I don't care, but try to get reference stories that aren't just from your home country with your home industry. Because I know, people start to look and go, oh, it's great you did that there, but show me somebody more, that I can relate to. And probably not saying this right, but I do this subconscious calculation, risk versus reward. I know the risk is the $5. You're asking me to spend $5 more, but in this case, the reward is $30. It's a 500% ROI. So for me, this is a go. Now let's just say that it's a $5 investment. It's going to create $6 of increment, so $1 extra. That's not a go for me. It will be, but I'm going to hammer you on the data. I might ask you to guarantee it. I might ask you to go to my machines like energy or water, like something hard. So the more the benefit is, the more I'm willing to take a little more risk to it because I don't need to get all of it to hit my minimum threshold. Something to put in the back of your mind. So if the ROI is low and you're asking for a lot of money, you're going to have more numbers on this, and you probably need to get a guarantees and performance. If it's huge and it's reasonable, people sit back and go, is it reasonable enough? Even if he's half right, I'm still doing well. So that's the believability. So this term you saw before called total profit added, it's an evolution of total cost of ownership. And let's just quickly walk through where value is created during the buying or using process of a product or service. So somebody's going to build something. So back to this new product development, some big company is going to build. I'm going to stay with product just because it's easier. They're going to build something. And they're going to sit there, and as I mentioned before, they're going to make a robustness decision. They could make that machine, car, we'll stay with cars today. They can make that car last forever. It would be expensive, it might be fun to drive, it might be heavy, it might be not fuel efficient, but they're making trade-offs. Wait, I built it, can I actually manufacture it? I mean, the tolerance trade-offs, what tolerances do I need within the production? And again, there's a million of these, I'm just trying to give examples. But time to market, margin that the product creates in the marketplace, and the sales that they will hit, usually you don't get taken into account. If you're a supplier to this company saying, look, I can help speed up the time from ideation to product launch. In some industries, that's not worth much. But in the pharma industry, it's everything. You get a patent, I think it's 10 years, I could be wrong. But if you get the patent and it takes you 10 years because of manufacturing delays, production process improvements, packaging, marketing material, that's huge. That's 1/10 of all that value gone. So in the high-tech world, new phones, new laptops for the back to school cycle, the Christmas cycle, supposedly the Valentine's Day is a big cycle for cell phones. Somebody was in the market told me once. So time to market can be very valuable. Margin. If I'm a supplier to this company and I say, hey, what if I helped you add this functionality with AI, we'll just say, what if I did some Internet of Things? I helped you add a new function to your product or service. Would that be worth something? I mean, sometimes that could be worth a lot. Either way, you get the idea that there's a lot of these different things happening. So somebody builds it, and now we're going to get into somebody buying it. And I think this is important because a lot of procurement people will say to me, we buy on total value, total cost of ownership. I would push back and say, that's great. At least you have a value mindset. Can you explain to me what you measure and how you measure it? Sometimes they would tell me. Sometimes they'd say, well, it's not a structure, or we don't really have anything. But now we're into a discussion. But what I found with a lot of people, I would say, so how do you measure value? And they would say things like, what's the price of the product or service? But what's my minimum order quantity? What are the payments terms? Can I reduce my suppliers? Is the supplier local? Do I have currency risk? Is there a return policy? Who pays freight, logistics? How close are they to me versus far away because of shipping cost? And these are important factors, but this is total cost of acquisition, not total cost of ownership. And believe it or not, when I explain this to people, they go, well, we assume everything else is the same. And I say, well, two cars, we'll stay with the car example. There's two four-door cars that we'll just say they're both gas for argument's sake. And they're just, these things I can measure, but once the company or the person buys that asset, they have to operate it and maintain it. Now, for everybody on the call here, there will be different things here. But how much energy does the machine use? How much lubricant? How much water? How much grease? I don't know. It all uses something. How long will it last? Maybe I can repair yours and I can't repair yours. Maybe you have a repair program. Maybe you don't. Maybe you make up all your money in your back end parts. There are some industries that might sell their initial machine price or consulting services at a low price, and they make up all their money once they're into the customer. Oh, you need to repair the machine? You have to buy the parts from us, and our parts are very expensive. Total cost of ownership doesn't address production. Production is revenue. Higher quality is a revenue. So cost is only one side of the equation. I, as a company, whether I'm buying or selling, want to be more profitable. So I could look at the cost side and the revenue side leading to the profit side. And finally, you have disposal cost. So if I'm creating a new product and I'm getting there going, wait a minute, if I just change this function or add this service, maybe there's a return program. Maybe that's worth a lot. Maybe customers perceive that to be different. Maybe I could refurbish these things. I mean, disposal could be the highest value driver within a product or service. I mean, you take a car, you send it back to a company, they refurbish it, sell it as refurbished or certified, whatever the term is. They make a lot of money doing that. So take this slide and try to walk a product or service you have through it, change the words, of course, but hopefully it'll give you a thought process, and then take that back when you're building something new and say, how am I affecting these different things? Because eventually, at least I found, I ended up with 400 of these, and there was always a few more you'd find, but these become core of what you do. So the question is, where's the big money? We don't have time to go into it, but a lot of research shows that 80 to 90% of the cost and value of a product or service is when you use it. Okay, so looking through the whole life cycle, and I think the last slide here, the price break is just a great visual to use with customers to say, yes, remember price was part of that acquisition phase, but there's all these other things that affect how profitable you will be. My job is to articulate these and quantify them in a way that is reasonable, that makes sense, and is clear. And the last one here, this is one of my favorite slides. So a long time ago, I was in England, outside London. Huthwaite is a sales training organization, spin selling. We did a session one day on how do you sell and how do you buy value. So I can't remember who went first, but either way, this lady gets up, and she was at AstraZeneca. I don't know if I've got her correct title up here somewhere, but she's now in charge of a procurement association. And I'll read it, you can all, but suppliers don't come to us with a business case. It's what we want. Sell your value in our numbers to get our attention. And that could start by industry averages or something. But my favorite part, if you can't quantify your value, don't be surprised at the failure of procurement. Sorry, to do so, I believe is what it says. Todd, if all your team does is sell this service and you're trying to charge me 20% more, how am I supposed to figure out you're worth it? I'm nicer, I'm more responsive, I'm closer. That doesn't mean anything to me. You put a business case that makes sense in front of me. I might go high, I might go low, but I'm not going to justify paying you more. That's your job. And by the way, do you have any idea that I'm responsible for procurement for a Fortune 1000 company? I could never be an expert on the value of everything a possible supplier could bring. So value propositions. So
hey Todd, real quick, I think we lost the camera.
I thought so. I thought it just got moved somewhere. No, just see you.
There we are. Perfect. All right, let's resume. Thank you.
There you go. Sorry about that. People are probably happy. So when you take a look at what you're doing, the logic I always worked through was this: features, then benefits, then money. So, if I'm going to add this function out of this feature, lighter, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make the machining better. I'm going to use lighter, whatever that is. What are the benefits? So if you look at any of your sales and marketing material and it has the benefits, faster, easier, quicker, less, more responsive, whatever those words are, they're great. But if you keep asking yourself this question, so what, you will eventually get to something you could quantify. And I think this is something because I came from outside the engineering world, and people would say, we're more reliable. And I'm like, why does that matter? Explain to me. Well, they explain what reliability is. When you want the machine to run, it runs. And I learned something's valuable when it doesn't work. I expect the car to start, it doesn't start. Now I understand, like, oh God. But I said, well, if it's more reliable, you need less parts. If it's more reliable, you don't need to fix it as often. If it's more reliable, you can plan. Okay, I won't bore you with this, but if I kept asking this question, so what, I was able to put a number on what the value of that was. So back to that stage gate. If the team comes with, here's all the benefits for customers, what's that worth? Well, you can't quantify safety. Yes, you can. We don't have time to go through all these, like again, 400, but you can. You have to ask yourself some questions. You have to look at it from the customer's perspective. You have to walk a day in the life of it. So true example, and this is a true thing. Again, SKF, great company, used to work for them for a bunch of years. They launched this energy efficient bearing. Big deal. Like big deal, energy bad, or excessive energy use, waste bad. Global conference, company's 100 years old. And of course, with technical people, you have to spend most of the time saying, how did I get there? I changed this, I changed this, I changed this, you know, and everyone's nodding, going, okay, the logic behind how this thing will use less energy makes sense. Okay, so, and you know, it was very interesting, don't get me wrong. You can't just say, trust me, it's going to do something. There's a reasoning behind here. And then the next part of the presentation was, well, the benefit to the customer is this bearing in this machine is going to run cooler, and it's going to have the same life, and it's going to use, you know, have less friction. And then they stopped there. And I said, well, what's the benefit of a bearing running cooler? And it was an American gentleman beside me. He looks at me and he goes, you're an idiot. And I said, wow, you know, and I've been in the industry 20 years maybe or something. And he goes, everybody knows there's a correlation, and I won't bore you with it, but if you can reduce the temperature a bearing operates, every degree or every 2 degrees or 5 degrees, you double the lubricant life. Oh, now so what? It runs cooler, so what? Well, the lubricant life will be extended. Well, so what? Well, you reduce the cost, the amount of money you spend on lubricant. Okay. That means I also reduce the amount of money I spend on lubricant disposal and lubricant inventory and lubricant application. Oh, now I have a number. And the point being, if the person that worked for the company for 20 years didn't understand this value, and this was launched, no customer was jumping up and down. Because it turns out the 30% or a third percent reduction of energy of the bearing is a rounding error of the overall energy consumption of the machine, a rounding error. But when we started talking about lubrication cost reduction, every bearing needs lubricant. People got very excited. Mr. Customer, what's your total lubricant spend for your industrial machines? X. How much of that do you think goes in the bearing? Some of it might go on chains, some of probably a third. Okay, I'm getting some numbers. That half of it is worth this. So what? So some examples of maybe where companies didn't do this, and I hope, well, companies on here might do this. But I hear a lot companies talking about their unique selling proposition. And again, if you delve in deeply into the material, it might talk about value, but by itself, a unique selling proposition is not the same as something that is of value. Let me give you 2 examples. 25 years ago, I'm interviewing with this global industrial company, and I say to the managing director, who happens to be Swedish, great guy, good friend of mine, long retired, and I said to him at the end of the full day interview, I said, I have one question. It's my understanding that I'm making numbers up, people, but you're 20% higher than the next major competitors in the market. And he nodded, he goes, that's why we're hiring somebody like you. And he said, so why do people buy from you? And you're talking 10, 20, $50 million contracts. And he looks with me, straight face, Swedish, stoic. And he goes, well, we're Swedish. And I started laughing. And it turns out it wasn't a joke. I'm like, okay, well, you just screwed up that interview. And he goes, no. It's because we're Swedish. And I'm like, okay, North American customers pay 20% more because your head office is in Sweden. He goes, no, what I meant was, and again, I'm not here to do a value proposition example, but we spend more money on research and development. We have more engineers per customer in the world. We've got more innovation, patent, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, that's not what you said. You told me you're unique. Something unique about you is your head office was there. I don't care where your head office is in general. Side comment here, one of my consulting clients and me were working on a project. They're local, they're North American for what they do. They're competing with some Asian importer or suppliers, we'll say. We were able to quantify the value of local supply. I think it was 26% more. If you're putting something on a ship from Asia, you need, and I can't remember all the numbers right now, but it's 6 weeks on the boat. These people are 1 week down the street. That means you're carrying 5 weeks extra inventory. Cost of capital times if depreciation. You have the risk that you've got to take into account with the port strike. I mean, I won't go through the whole thing. You have currency risk, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're able with enough thinking to start to put some numbers to it And when the team and myself showed it to customers, they said, we've talked always about what the value of local supply was. To be honest, in our matrix, we usually put 3%. You've got 28. How about we, I think we'll say it's worth 20. At least I got him 17% more. And these are Fortune 1000 companies that said, there's some meat there that I can understand. We want to de-risk our supply chain, but going into saying I'm local, I'm nice, I can be responsive, probably not going to get you much of a price differential. Last example, I could spend the whole day telling stories of what not to do, but the purpose of these is this one's a little bit different. So company creates a new product and they say the need in the marketplace is we need to reduce noise pollution. Noise pollution bad. Okay, agreed. So they create this bearing that actually creates less noise. Don't ask me how, and the amount doesn't matter. And one day I'm with some colleagues and we're doing a global key account meeting with a big pulp and paper customer. And of course, they want to, the meeting room is buried in the biggest paper facility. So we get all dressed up, we get into the room, coming in the back door, in comes the management team they're walking the floor, doing a tour, and they come in and they've got the big hearing aid protection on, the hard helmets and the safety glasses and the boots, and sit down. And my colleague, God love him, he was given the presentation. The value is quieter. And my God, he's going to tell that story because that's what he was told that the value is. He gets up, gets to slide 3 and starts talking how these bearings are going to reduce sound by, say, 30%. And the head gentleman in production just started laughing. He goes, have you guys ever been in a paper mill? And we all said yes. He goes, the bearings don't make the noise. The point is, value is specific by customer segments. It's not a wash against everybody's segments, countries, everything. But you have to really think through, it's not the same for everybody. And that was almost an embarrassing one. So yes, it's unique. Here's something unique. I'm Canadian. What's that worth? Probably nothing. So just because it's unique, I want it to be unique. It leads to a benefit. I want that benefit to be quantifiable, because if not, someone's going to throw a number at it. It's unique. It's more worth 1%. Yeah, I want to do the math. So this is Todd's world. But a lot of people I hear, and again, I've been doing this for a long time, and when I started, there was no tool. And it's not a sales pitch, but a lot of people say, well, our team does this, it's just a tool. It's just a flat. No, it's not. So I want to give you examples of what I've seen people do that are wrong. Or what they could do better, okay? And why you need this structure. So I've seen, and I'm talking big companies here, like Fortune, huge companies, that have Excel spreadsheets usually that have inaccurate formulas. A decibel has been moved. Somebody forgot it's 1 minus this. I mean, I'm just amazed because, when you see numbers and you look at it and you go, that doesn't feel right. Oh, you're right. Everything's created ad hoc where everyone gets a spreadsheet and modifies it. And no matter if you lock it or don't lock it, I don't know. There's formula mistakes buried there. So that's what I mean by accurate is a mistake. I've seen numerous companies actually create formulas that are wrong. And the example I have here is cash flow. And in some industries, their value proposition is, Mr. Customer, I can help you get your money in quicker, or I can help you delay when you pay it without penalties on either side. And they would calculate the value of that as a full value. The best example is everybody here pays their cable provider, say $100 a month. And I'm pretty sure it's more than that. If not, tell me where you're getting yours from. But if you have 12 months and you pay every month $100 a month, every 30 days, $100, $1,200 a year, and I magically find you a way to extend that so you pay it in 60 days. I'm still paying the supplier, the same amount of money. I'm just changing when I'm paying it. So some people will say, well, for a month, you have an extra $100. Here's $100. I'm like, no, I have the extra $100 in the bank. I'm going to make this up. That pays me 5%, for 30 days divided by 3. I mean, it's a rounding error. If I go spend that $100, I still owe it. Maybe, it rolls into next year, but I'm still liable for the same amount of money. I actually have a paper from, I think it was the UK Finance Association and a procurement people that say, people that are quantifying cash flow as 100% free cash are incorrect. And I watch Fortune 1000 companies actually use that. I mean, challenge your people, because there's nothing like throwing out a calculation where somebody goes BS. We'll leave it at that. Put some ranges in there based on some research. I see a lot of teams are saying, if we could do this by 1%, if I could reduce this, and if my house wasn't in Michigan, and if it was in Florida on the ocean, it would be worth more. It's not, and it can't be. So let's try to put some, reasonable ranges. And this is where you can use outside research or other industries where you've done this from. When you don't have a tool, the output gets hilarious. Spelling is wrong, currency, units. Nick, if you wouldn't mind jumping on, because this is one of my favorite ones. And again, these are big companies. This isn't somebody that just tried this on their own. This was going to customers. And, it said, the line said ROI, and I'm making up numbers for the point, 100%. Nick, is 100% ROI good or bad?
No, because you want, when I'm doing marketing spend, I want 2 or 3x ROI, which would be 200, 300%.
Okay. Let's say it's 300% ROI, because you want to be an arguer today. Let's say it's 300%. Is 300% ROI good?
Depends on the context, but it's better than 100%.
It's okay. You just made it one point there. It's the relative to things, but the example being, we'll just go with the 100% ROI versus 10% ROI. Well, 100% is better. No, you need time frame. A 10% ROI every 7 days is worth a lot more than 100% ROI in 50 years. Well, you know what I meant. No, I don't know what you meant, because that sheet's getting passed around and people just look at that number all the time. And I'm like, wait a minute, and again, they're probably apples and oranges, but we could do net present value calculations. We could have thresholds, like Nick said, when it comes to marketing ROI, you want a different number than maybe other stuff, but you need to have time frame. ROI without time frame, in my opinion, is worthless, because you're comparing apples and oranges. Links to third-party justifications. So this buying offshore example I did, risk of it getting stuck. Here's 6 companies last year that didn't hit their earnings number because they couldn't get stuff into the port. I can't remember if that was COVID year or strike year or something. Reference shipping cost. The highest shipping cost has been 12. There's actually an index, $12,000 US per container cargo ship, dropped down to 2,000. It's up to 4,500 now, and the prediction is it's going back up. The reason why is North America used to bring in stuff from Asia, and then we'd send our recyclable garbage back. A lot of Asian countries have said we don't want that, so these containers are going back empty. That's why they're doubling. So references to third parties. So it's not just Todd saying, hey, have you ever thought there could be risk? There could be risk. Ooh, when it's a CNBC article or it's a Bloomberg projection or it's whatever, you're putting some meat to it. I'm amazed, and again, Nick, the marketing guy here, but how visual is important. When I started this 25 years ago, the numbers are the numbers. Oh no, bar charts, cash flow break evens, stack charts with, indirect or OPEX savings versus, visualization. Because remember, your contact, you might have bought into the value analysis. They might have helped you build the value analysis. That person's probably taking that report and going to other people without you. It's got to be clear, concise, validated, understandable, and visuals make a difference. Terminology is horrible, but I'm just putting down what we have when I built this stuff ages ago. When you build a proposal for a customer, so, I'm a salesperson, run the calculation before you walk in front of the customer. Remember what's doing what and why. Put some numbers in and just get a flavor. I'll give you an example. I put all these numbers in, I'm making this up, $20 for labor savings. I'm like, you want to know what? What if I don't put anything in for labor savings? Oh, the ROI is still really good. So when the customer starts having a huge argument with me about labor at $20, that seems high. And I'm like, it's a loaded cost. And you want to know what? Want to put 15 in? Now I know that it's not going to make a big difference, but energy or down, whatever it is, I know where the important numbers are. And that's where I want to do more of my research. So I've done the pre-work. Then I go to a customer and I propose them something. They modify it back and forth. We had a term, and it's, again, Nick, you're the marketing guy, accepted. Because the boss wanted to see, we did this value analysis, we delivered the business case, how many people bought more stuff because of it? Accepted being that level. They've accepted the logic. And then we'd actually go back, if we were smart, and verify what actually happened. Did they get the value we projected? Did they get more? Did they get less? The best part, if they were getting less, $5 says it was because of an implementation or a culture or something we could fix easily. But you want to have that ongoing iteration. Then what else do you got in your tricks? What other ideas do you have for me? So then if you get to verified, then you can go into the system and pull out. I've done this, I'm making numbers up 55 times. Here's the average ROI. Here's the average impact. Now you're putting meat around your what ifs. Then the tool can become predictive. You know, here's the min, here's the max, here's the average. I've done this enough times. I'd have customers look at me, and this, I don't want to sound arrogant, but you know more about us than we do. I mean, you beat them with data. It needs to be clear and easy. A lot of times when I see people create their own version, it's how many more tabs can I build on a spreadsheet? The more confusing it is, the better. No, I want depth and I want clarity to it. I don't want it to be what if, but I don't want to be so confusing that I could never understand. And some, at least engineering technical people think, you know, the more complicated, the better. No, that's when someone goes, I'm not showing that to anybody. I don't understand it, and therefore I don't believe it. And then I think the most important thing is it has to be repeatable. Not depends on what mood I'm in, what day, who's doing this. You know, the salesperson says, I want this ROI, go make up that number. And one customer, I won't use the name, said, 5 people from this company, whoever they are, came in all with the same value situation, solution to the same company with the same problem. The 5 business cases didn't look anything alike. They all talk. That was within one company, but then that customer probably ends up somewhere else. So I want something repeatable. You can always improve it. You can always say, I found a new value driver, let's add it. But, you know, having some structure makes sense. So we're getting into the last section here on pricing. So if you're building a new product or service, it's the time to think about your pricing model, okay? Ugly diagram on the right, but it's from an article that I was involved with. And you have the cost, okay? We know what our cost is. It is the worst pricing model for value. I'm not saying you don't need to know cost. I would tell our people, I don't want to hear the word cost until I understand value, because I don't want to anchor on it. It only cost us $10. I want my markup to be X. But, you know, cost plus has no link to value. Target margin is really the exact same thing. Competition base, okay, you know, this is 20% better than the existing or a competitor. You know, it's interesting. I always wonder where the information is of what the competitor is really selling at, but this isn't based on value either. You know, it's just saying, I think I can get 20% more. Why? Well, I'm local. Okay. Value based, you might feel this is probably where I spend, you know. There's 2 areas here. And again, to bore you with the diagram on the right here, value based, as Professor Andreas has down, is the proactive business cases that I think if you do this, it'll be worth this. Okay. And if I feel good about it, it makes sense. The logic is there. I'm buying. I don't need you to come to my house and spend 3 weeks measuring every damn thing you want to measure. I don't have time for that. So I'm more than willing to take a predictive, proactive business case. Then there's performance-based. It says, Todd, I will pay you after the value is realized. Maybe I pay you X up front, and then there's a performance or there's a risk reward or something. And you can see on the diagram, you know, this is really where you get that performance in the top right versus value-based. I mean, there are variations of value. We don't have time to get into variable, but, you know, I don't know if anybody saw this, Wendy's came out, and there's just a terminology here that I think is important. Demand is, I expect demand to be more. So my summer pricing, I'm making this up. Look, for Disney, it'll be higher than winter pricing. My weekend pricing will be higher than my during the week pricing. So that's demand assumed. Movie theaters, Tuesdays will be cheap and Friday, Saturday, Sundays will be expensive. That's just old, but, you know, based. Dynamic that says it's going to be live. It could be some Tuesday where July 4th, I don't know. I mean, it's just going to go up and down. And it, you know, it also can go down. And then there's services based. And I think I left one thing in here. I don't know, sorry, the visual's not there. Maybe it pops up. I'm sorry, I changed the slides to white, but great article. It's from free to fee. But the idea being the differentiation on what you build, the product or service, might be on the services that you build around it. So this professor is now at INSEAD. He was in the States at Arizona, but said, you know, A lot of companies give away services. They don't differentiate based on service. They don't price properly for services. And they went in and said, look, let's clearly identify what services we have. Let's have free versions and 4 fee versions. And it's amazing how you get people to move. If anybody remembers my slides on choice and having these types of things, it makes a big difference. So the product, you might not be new, but you're trying to add services to it to differentiate. Sell those services, price for those services, keep them clear, concise, and differentiated. Then you could have a free version. I'm the highest priced gentleman in the marketplace. I need to do some things for free, but there's the 4 fee. One example, engineering design, pay, don't pay. It passes, it fails, I respond in 1 week, we can do it, or that product will do it. Yes, free. Engineering redesign within 24 hours with 7 improvement ideas for a fee. Training, free or for a fee. Todd drops in for lunch for an hour and shows you some neat things and gives you pizza and says, hi, free. 3-day training program on ABC for a fee. You can take the same thing, shipping, Amazon. So these are just some associations and academics, people that I've worked with over 20-something years. But the ones on the left are all about value selling, value pricing, value quantification. On the buying side, the selling side. So University of Tennessee and RSM and even IMD to a certain extent were all procurement saying we need to buy best value. So these are the procurement associations around the world that have had me come in and say, we got to buy value. How is it? What is it? How do I measure it? I'm not saying I was involved with these governments, but these government groups have done some stuff around it. And then a lot of associations, industrial, strategic account management, pricing, that have said, we've got to find a way to quantify our value. And again, so I can sell it, so I can price it, so I can build it, new product development, and I can market it. And last slide again, second last slide, but the idea being we need to look at value across all these different ideas. We talked today about value conceptualization. Am I building something that creates customer value? Then it needs to be in your selling process. Then you need a tool to quantify it. Then you need to train your people so they're comfortable having these discussions with economic buyers, fixed cost, variable cost, ROI, cash flow, probability. And then you need to equip the team to want to sell value. Am I motivating the right behaviors by compensation? Am I giving my customers these value buying options, risk reward? Do I have a business culture that says we'll walk away from bad orders? Every order doesn't mean it's good. I could increase sales tomorrow for anybody just by dropping the price. Well, that's not what I meant. You've got to have that culture. Not going to go through the slide, you're going to get the deck, but this is a slide that says from procurement people, if you buy best value, as we've discussed it, you're more profitable. So it's not just a sales and marketing idea. Procurement does want best value, but they want you to measure it and to be realistic. Again, there's some big associations here that have done some big research. So for those of you, this is me. I do value. I help you put the calculations, build the strategy around it, get the tools running, the marketing so you can communicate it, the training on how do I do this? How do I get around variability? How do I get around what if statements? How do I engage procurement? And then pricing, options and value-based and performance-based. And last slide, I promise you, Nick, I just joined this organization, Sales Acceleration, a month ago, really for me to round out my offerings. A lot of small, mid-sized companies, they don't have a structure around their sales, how they go to market, how they train their people, how they onboard their people, how they plan, how they do budgeting, any of that stuff. So great set of people that have pulled together best practices there with a lot of tools. So if you happen to know people that are in the small, medium business communities, they're saying, sales aren't where they should be. We don't have a process. We want to grow. We're having profitable sales, have them reach out. And if you want, please, if you don't win the book from Nick, please feel free to jump on Amazon. It was the #1 sales book in March and #8 in pricing. Again, it's changed, I'm sure. Grab a coffee, leave a nice review. So there's my contact information there, Experts in Value, and join me on LinkedIn for the heck of it. And then here's my information for Sales Acceleration. When you get the slides, if you click the Sales Acceleration logo, it'll take you to the website. Also, just out of interest, there's a 10-question sales assessment tool. It'll just give you a high level, where are we? And most of the companies here are Fortune 1000, but I just know based on my experience, there's opportunities there. So it gives you a high level. There's a more advanced one. I think it's 50 questions. But again, if you click that, you can take it. And the final request is if you happen to know companies or friends in businesses that are that small, mid-size, saying, hey, we need help in all this sales structure, value, differentiation, have them send me a note. And I'd love to have a chat with them. So Nick, there we go. I know we ran up the time as usual.
No worries. Very dense and great presentation. So thank you so much, Todd. I know that our audience learns a lot from all these presentations, and we had a lot of audience requesting war stories. So I figured you were the perfect guy to come share your experiences. I think we're a little out of time for Q&A and the demo. So I'll just quickly round out our part by saying, we'll be giving out an exit survey upon leaving the webinar. You can sign up for a custom demo on your own. Brian will gladly spend 15 minutes with you sharing how we at Leverage Point help you put into practice a lot of the things that Todd just shared, both by quantifying the value that your solution generates for your B2B customers, as well as communicating it in a compelling, interactive, creative, visually stunning way. We've got a lot of exciting product announcements coming up in the upcoming months, so stay tuned. But in the meantime, please make sure you pre-register for our upcoming webinar. So our next one, we're going to keep it out of Memorial Day for the US audience. So this is going to be in June 13th. It's going to be featuring Bob Apollo. He'll be coming back and exploring ways that B2B commercial teams can establish clear differentiation, accelerate purchasing decisions through a system called proactive targeting and outcome-based marketing and selling. And finally, just another request, if you're a webinar regular and you don't feel like filling out the form every month, you can pre-register for the remainder of the 2024 webinar series in the exit survey. So if that sounds like you're interested in attending every month, let us know and we'll save you a few clicks along the way. So with that, that'll be it for us for today. So thank you so much for Todd for sharing, really 2 decades of experience is what to do, and I think more valuable things not to do. And from those of us here at Leverage Point, have an awesome rest of your week, and we look forward to seeing you on June 13th. So take care.